I'm interested in creating juggernauts. I'm not interested in winning once. I'm invested in the coaches. I want to win multiple times. I'm talking winning after winning after winning, because it's the hardest thing to do in sports. And so let's go and try to do that. And one of the things is thinking through what happens if we do win and actually having a plan and not being scared of that.
Hello and welcome back, or welcome to The Messy Middle. I'm your host, Andrew Horsfield. Thanks for your recent messages of thanks, support and encouragement regarding the podcast. It's great to know the guests that I'm talking to and the content that we're covering is helping you find better ways to work, lead and live. And please, if you feel inclined, leave a review or share an episode within your network so we can broaden the listenership and enhance the impact of the podcast. Your support really does make a difference. If you're a leader in charge of a team, a coach striving to be successful, or a parent committed to raising reasonable kids, this conversation with Cody Royle is going to resonate with you. Cody is an author, speaker and coach who spends the majority of his time coaching head coaches working at the elite level of sport. And while you may think this kind of conversation would mean testosterone-fueled discussions around motivation, peak performance and success, you'd be mistaken, as Cody takes a more considered and somewhat counterintuitive approach to his work. In this great conversation, we discuss the cognitive demands leaders have to deal with and how you can navigate the stress and anxiety that can come with leading people. We explore the importance of identifying the gaps between your aspirations and the obstacles in your path, the importance of awareness, communication and decision-making, how continuous learning can propel your leadership to new heights, and so much more. This episode will really help you embrace your ambitions and pursue your boldest objectives. I hope you're ready to absorb the valuable insights that come from this conversation with Coach of the Coaches, Cody Royle. Cody, welcome to The Messy Middle. It's awesome to have you on to be talking people, performance, leadership, resilience. I'm just sure we're going to cover a whole range of topics. It's awesome to have you on. So welcome to The Messy Middle.
Andrew, thank you. Thanks for getting in touch. Absolutely delighted to be here and participate as part of your show. I love the title, by the way. It's one of the favourite ones that I've come across.
What do you like about it, or what does it bring up for you?
It's just messy, mate. And we need to talk about it. We need to, even, if I look at, say, organisations and being in the middle and the messiness that occurs there, often it doesn't get talked about, and so we don't really develop any skills or new ideas around how we can navigate that. We just pretend that it's all clean and everything's good, and I don't think that's served us particularly well.
You work deeply in high-performance environments. Assume that I've just engaged you to come and work with my team, who I think are really highly capable, but they're not performing to their potential. What are the things that you consider or ask or come to look for when you start that engagement process to work with a team or a coach?
Yeah, well, mine's predominantly the coach. So it's the coach that reaches out and so maybe we'll start there, and it kind of invariably ends up with the team. But for me, I'm looking for the primary thing is, I'm a coach. It's just like almost a validation of do you actually want to be coached? Like, are you actually open to being coached, and why? And often there's a reason. I was explaining to someone earlier. In a weird way, this is a relatively new-ish domain, and it's kind of following the trajectory of like therapy almost, where coaches need to have an occurrence. They need to wake up, face down in a ditch to reach out for help. But once they do, they're very generally pretty open to the help and committed to to what I have to offer. And so that's a starting point, is like, is this actually for you? And then do we trust each other, or can we see ourselves trusting each other? Because that's the other part, is there's no point getting into it if we don't, because it is going to get messy, particularly in the middle.
Yeah.
From there, it can go a variety of ways based on what the coach wants to do. But what particularly interests me, and what I'm really intrigued by, is coaches that want to do really big things. They're searching for either things that people haven't done before, or they're trying to change the game, or they're chasing a particular, some sort of goal that is big. Because I like that type of thinking. I like big thinking and people that are open to trying to chase things that have never been done, because they're really hard. And those are the kind of challenges that I want too. And so those would be the two, is do you actually want it, and do we trust each other? And then if you're aiming for something that's really big, I'm really interested.
I love that you're thinking about those sort of metrics in the conversation. Is it just a conversation, or do you go and spend time together? How do you make that assessment of, can we trust each other, and is this ambition big enough to warrant the work that you want to do?
Yeah, you can get to those in a conversation. I work with coaches all over the world, which is great. And so the opportunity to kind of fly to all the different destinations, I'd love that. But with a 2-year-old and a wife that I like and want to keep, that's not really an option. But with the right questions and the right attitude towards a conversation, you can dig into that in an hour or a half day of time together with a coach. And again, often they're coming kind of primed. They've probably seen something about me. They might have seen my podcast or read one of the books. And so they know a little bit about me. And I probably know a little bit about them. And so we can really go to let's talk about whether this can work.
We can often have that space between, the ambition that we have and the actions that we take, and they don't quite marry up. So I'm interested in your view around, why do we struggle with that so much at every level of business in our life, and what can we do about it?
Yeah, well, everyone wants to dream big, don't they? That's kind of what every Hollywood movie is about. It's the guy that's chasing the girl that's out of his league, or the ragtag team that, gets thrown together and is trying to, Mighty Ducks, and they're trying to achieve bigger things and beat Iceland or whoever it was. And but yeah, often the behaviors don't match. Sometimes the mindset doesn't match. That's one of the things that I really get out of a conversation is the mindset close to the aspirations, because it's gonna, like we talked about, doing things that haven't been done before or are very difficult, or changing the game, or playing a different style, or leading a big team that has lots of stakeholders that have varying ideas of what success looks like. It takes a lot. It takes a huge mindset and the ability to not flinch. And so I'm looking for those out of a conversation. And then really, to your point, it starts with an audit of what are the gaps between those things. In the second set of eyes, my latest book, I write about the 3 questions that I ask straight away. It's, what are you trying to achieve? Who do you want to be while you achieve those things? And then what's in the way right now? And when we get to those, now we have a framework of what those gaps might be, what's in the way, but then also, what are you doing that's potentially not allowing you to progress towards that goal? And sometimes it is the coach themselves. Sometimes there's some socialization in it, right? Like it's easier to just kind of go with the socialization and kind of be normal and not stand out. And so you're really looking to kind of push them out onto the playground and go and do these things that you say you want to do, and it's going to be okay. And my role becomes a bit of kind of reassurance and helping them with some bravery.
Yeah, look, there's 25 questions I've been writing down as you've been speaking there really quickly to try not lose them. First of all, tell me, because I love the fact that you frame that as a positive gap, not necessarily a negative gap. So there's this aspirational in terms of what they're moving into as opposed to what the deficit is. Is that a purposeful choice that you make in your work?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think that's a stronger motivator for the particular type of person that becomes a head coach, is striving towards something. There's also a bit of an organizational element to that, in that like strengths-based leadership and strengths-based just approaches to most things, I think, are potentially more fruitful. And the reality is the amount of things you need to be an expert in to be a head coach at the elite level, it's too much to be an expert in. And so we've got to choose how we're going to approach it and what strengths you're going to use. And so I want to focus on them first. It's not to say we don't talk about, areas to improvement or weaknesses or things to offload or delegate. But yeah, I'm big on what can you do and what can you do at an elite level, and let's go there first. Just like we would be with our athletes, and just like I was with my players when I coached for 15 years. It was, tell me what you can do and tell me what you're really elite at, and we'll start there, and I'm going to give you opportunities to do that more often. It's no different for a leader.
Do you think that's an underestimated thing that we don't spend enough time on in terms of that strength and the recognising what people do well and catching them doing it right, as opposed to looking for the problem, thinking that's our fix?
Yeah, big time.
Yeah.
And I've seen it in both. While I was coaching here, I spent 15 years in big corporate enterprises, some of the biggest banks in the country. I worked in user experience. I'm a writer by trade, and I was in the UX team of the mobile app of the biggest bank in Canada. And so I've seen big corporate and kind of that traditional model of, finding gaps and finding areas for improvement. And the annual review kind of just talks about all the things that you need to improve and doesn't even often mention all of the work that you've achieved in the last year or what you're good at. And I think from a performance perspective, that's quite backwards. But then, there's also cultural elements to that as well, where we don't catch people. We don't catch the good. We don't have the language to see someone, either as a leader or a team member, see one of our teammates committing to a behavior that's going to be helpful to us all, and actually pointing that out to them and say, I love that behavior. I love what you do, or I love how you speak, or we don't even have a language to describe that to either ourselves or our teammates. And so, if I were running a team, that's what I would be working on, rather than, it's so easy to say you don't do this well. We have the language for that already.
The other part that I thought was really terrific that you mentioned is that element of bravery and people needing a little bit of a push to be brave, and you mentioned not flinching. Can you tell us a little bit more about the role that plays, the bravery part, and you offering that assurance to keep stepping?
Everyone's brave at the interview, right? I'm going to come in and I'm going to do all of these things, and I'm going to, change all this, and I've got these great ideas from the last place I was at, and I'm the guy or I'm the girl. And then you get in there, and then people say, maybe don't aim so high. And then, there's a bit of socialization come in from maybe, in sport, it's like the game, right? Like, don't step outside the game and do anything differently. Don't play differently. Like in soccer, there's no rules to say you have to have a formation, but everyone just agrees that we have a formation. So don't break from that. Heaven forbid you were to play man on man instead of a zonal structure. Like, just don't, and so the game starts to chip away at your bravery. People inside the organization, maybe you lose a couple in a row and you lose some of your own natural bravery. And then this is where, this is for anyone, but in my line of work, this is where a coach or a second set of eyes or a mentor can really come in and just say, it's going to be okay. Tell me about the situation. And then, I see my role as kind of pushing them back out onto the playground and saying, like, go on, I know you fell, but go on, try again. And I'm here to pick you up. And we all need that, whether it's coaches or just, from our family. We need our mums and our dads to come and pick us up again and say, go again, like go and try again. And so that secondary reinforcement is often all people need to kind of get some confidence back and get some bravery back to, again, go and pursue the things that they actually want.
Tell me about the role of attentional focus in that, around what we focus on, what we don't, what we give our time and attention to in terms of performance and improvement, and what we don't. How important is that intentional focus for someone at that elite level of leadership and coaching?
So in my world, it's basically everything. So if you map what a head coach does, is they pay attention. And so that could be I don't work in individual sports, but if I was coaching sprinting, my attention would need to be on the stroke on the ground, on the biomechanics of the sprinter, on the particular shoulder swing and arm swing, and how quickly they're raising their head, and all of these kind of things. So like minute details of a sprinter, right the way through to, a football coach or a rugby league coach who needs to be able to see certain patterns within the game in real time and then be able to strip that out and go and design practice exercises. And so, I call it one of the three primary coaching skills is attention. The other two are communication and decision-making. And the most interesting thing about attention in the coaching world is that, one, it's underappreciated. Two, basically everything that coaches do detracts from their ability to pay attention. And then they certainly don't train to try to expand their attentional capacity, despite the fact that it really is their primary skill. And so, my work looks to map the coaching activities better to see if we can get more attention placed on the areas that they actually need their attention. And it can be just as simple as just an audit of their calendar and what activities they're going through, right the way through to the other end in terms of training attentional capacity. And, the thing that's been proven really to be the only way to expand your attentional capacity is mindfulness. But ultimately, that's training. So you've got to train your attention just like we ask our athletes to train their physiology and their psychology. They've got to be conditioned for what they're actually about to do. And coaches certainly aren't conditioned for what they're trying to do because they don't think about themselves as performers often.
How do they think of themselves from your experience?
Workhorses who need to be present at all times, available at all times, who need to sleep as little as possible to show some vague version of masculinity that apparently shows toughness and a level of commitment that is frankly unnecessary and does not contribute to either the players thinking they're tough or good at their job or actually being good at their job. That's the hard and fast version of it. And there's been research into that exact kind of mindset around coaches and how detrimental it is and how the players don't admire it. They kind of think it's stupid. Like they don't want someone rolling out of their office who's slept on the floor. Like how are you looking after the players in the best possible way and coaching the players in the best possible way when you've had 2 hours sleep? That's probably the biggest change that needs to be made is coaches thinking of themselves as performers. And then what does that mean? And it means that there's a change in the habits and a change in the mentality about what's important and what is helpful.
Because that then would tie into that second area, wouldn't it, around decision making? You can't make good decisions, if you're completely cooked and tired and fatigued.
Exactly, yeah. So the fascinating research into those three primary coaching skills, attentional capacity or awareness, communication and decision-making is, one, they all naturally decline throughout the day, right? So think of driving to work in the morning. in traffic and how alert and aware you are versus driving home from work after a full day's work and how alert and aware you are. Like there's just a natural decline without the work even being done. Same with your ability to generate the right words and the right intonation in your communication. Same, you might maybe have a conversation with your partner in the morning versus the way that you would try to communicate it in the evening, and have a think about how those tend to go. And similarly with decision making, right? And some of Daniel Pink wrote a book called When, and one of the things that came out of that was, if you get surgery in the evening, decline. you want the awareness and the decision making of someone in the morning, the surgeon in the morning. And again, what we do in coaching is we think it's tough and brave to get up at 6 a.m. but then coach an NBA game at 7 p.m. with you're already 13 hours down the barrel, and there's no way that you can have access to those primary skills to be able to notice the details that you need in real time with 10,000 people screaming at you, let alone make the decisions that are optimal. And so that's what I mean. Like we need to start thinking about ourselves as performers, because those are the things that matter. The decision to take a time out or not with 2 minutes left is the most crucial thing.
And what role does curiosity play in that, in terms of being able to perform at a high level and continue to improve at a high level?
I'd say, curiosity and learning tend to be the first things that go when there's a time crunch. And so executives in business kind of went through this, in the 90s and 2000s, right? There's no time, there's always working, and the curiosity kind of went. And they've actually, I would say, if I were to make a broad commentary, I think that has swung back the other way. I think there's a lot more thinking time and learning time for executives that is like built into their structures and their workflows, because the speed of innovation is so fast that if they're not learning and curious and seeing different ideas that might be a skerrick of something in 3 to 5 years, they're going to lose out anyway. And that's one of the things that I would push back onto certainly the coaches that I work with, but any coach really, is the speed of innovation is so vast that if you're not making time to continue to learn throughout rather than doing this mad scramble, you spend a month doing your learning and then maybe don't get an opportunity to actually go and implement any of those things. And so a better way is to work it into the everyday flow. And so that's what, again, a mentor or a second set of eyes can help with, is it's like forced learning. You can't drop this from the calendar. It's going in there, and you have to take part in it because you're going to need it.
Mm-hmm. How would you respond to that mindset of that person who's struggling to just keep their nose above the waterline, and who wants to do what we're suggesting, or you're certainly suggesting, but just is finding it a struggle?
I would say for someone that maybe questions it or wants to do it but doesn't know how, is don't go to the end first. Go to the smallest possible win that you can get. And often, one of the reasons that I ask the third question that I outlined before, like what's in the way right now, is because often it's that they're avoiding something or someone, like a conversation that needs to be had. And often a conversation that needs to be had for people that tell me they don't have enough time is a tough conversation, because you need to put some sort of barriers in place around your time. That could be that you're not going to respond to emails after 8 p.m. and you can offer a reason as to why, and it could be we changed the time of this podcast a couple of times, you and I, because we were time boxing time for our parenting. Both of us, we actually both did that.
Mm.
And that's one that I found that tough. I don't know about you, but in explaining to people, I want to put my son to bed every night, I go, oh, okay, it's perfectly human. And so, there can be small wins like that often people will avoid because they don't want to have that conversation. And so those small wins can be a good start to start to train yourself to learn how to say no to things.
Can you talk us through a little bit around coaches that you've had to work with or a experience where you've had where they've been complicit in the conditions or circumstances or culture they say they don't want, and how that conversation takes place? Because obviously at the level that you're dealing with in the majority of your work, these are people, as you say, who are at the top of their game. They've got thinking and behaviours and ways of working that have got them to a certain level of success that I imagine isn't just one conversation that they just then open up to you. So how do you deal with some of that? Okay, this has served you for a little while, but we've got to unlearn some stuff and relearn some new stuff.
Are you a Jerry Colonna fan? Is that where you got the quote from?
Yeah.
He's a good man. Often, I would say almost 100% of the time is that the thing that's in the way can be the coach or the coach's mentality of actually being in their own way. And that's what I mean in terms of you got to make sure you can have trust, because sometimes I might need to be the one to say, who the problem is here is you. You're in your own way. And having someone else that you trust point that out to you and say, this is actually what's in the way. And if you can deal with this, I think there's actually a real straight pathway for you. I think that's a really effective way to burst through those, because often we don't know that we're in our own way. So we can't just try to do this like self-awareness thing where we create a journal and it's going to make all of our issues go away, because self-reflection doesn't do that. Often it needs to come from someone close to you who's observing you and can say, I know you, and I know what your values are, and I know what you're striving towards. And my observation is this is what's in the way.
Yeah, I read a quote recently that said one of the most powerful stories in the world is the story that we can tell ourselves. And I'm just wondering, in your view, how important is that self-talk and internal dialogue that we tell ourselves? How important is that to performance and happiness and health?
Yeah, I wrote a book a couple of years ago called The Tough Stuff, and I wrote a chapter about communication, and what I said, something along the lines of, one of the major misses is that, the 5 elements of communication doesn't include self-talk. Like I can't fathom how you can put a list together of the types of communication, so verbal and, written and all this kind of stuff, without the one that actually we speak to ourselves way more than we actually communicate in all of those. And so I don't know why we've kind of separated the two, and self-talk is seen as pure psychology and the others are seen as this other kind of discipline over here. The most important thing to be able to upskill in terms of your communication skills is your self-talk. That would be kind of my statement on it. And then, in terms of working on it, there are little kind of guardrails that we can put in place. So, for instance, in a game, one of the things that I propose is that the coach has a match script or a mantra that they're working towards within the game, so that when their attention does wander, or when they are looking for a particular thing and maybe they're getting involved in talking to their assistant coaches or something, and they're not actually watching the game, they can snap themselves back into performance. And that can often just come through a simple script or mantra that they repeatedly tell themselves that they're looking at. I think we're headed down the wrong path when we just place everything. We've placed the self-awareness and self at the center of everything. One of the best ways to change your self-talk is to have someone actually hold a mirror up to you and say, I'm listening to what you're saying, and I'm listening to what you describe your own mentality, and I'm telling you that that's not true. And you need to change that and upgrade what you're telling yourself. And here's how we might want to do that. Again, that becomes my role, because I have very intimate conversations with coaches about their confidence and their self-talk and lack of self-confidence or lack of confidence in the game or their game style, or it can get messy.
Is there a role for you around separating the the identity of the coach. I'd imagine at that level with elite coaches, it's the identity of winning the Super Bowl, the Stanley Cup can be tied into their personal worth based on their professional success.
A lot are tied to that. Again, I wrote a chapter about that in the Tough Stuff about identity, and one of the more harrowing stories was, an NFL coach who had done particularly poorly and thought that his win-loss record was going to be on his tombstone. And I just said, what a shit thing to have on your tombstone, right? Like, you want it to just say was a great son and father and all these. You don't want any of your career achievements to be on there, I don't think. But the way that I think about it is I disagree with the kind of general idea of removing big goals from and achievements completely and like just focusing on the process. I think that's actually nonsense. We have to remember in our world, and again, elite sport can either be a lot like society or very different to society. We're talking about the ultra elite people in the world that are there to chase achievement. And so to remove that completely and say, don't focus on that is garbage. It's focus on that, but then after we've got that in mind, here's the process that we're going to get there, and we're going to focus predominantly on that process. And your mastery of that process will help us achieve that. They may sound like they're very similar, but I think those are quite drastically different approaches. And what you end up seeing, or what I've ended up observing, is that coaches can actually quite quickly shift to wanting to master that process and just trusting that that's where they're going to achieve their goals eventually.
So tell us where you see that as really different, because it does sound quite similar. Can you just pull that apart a little bit to explain how you see them as being different?
Yeah, well, it's the unhelpful obsession with only a goal as the only outcome that will be acceptable is the first one. And often, that's the pursuit that kind of leads down quite a detrimental path with regard to someone's identity, in that they only see themselves as one thing. And so that would be, like a Super Bowl winning coach or nothing. Whereas, when you're looking at, okay, I want to win a Super Bowl, but the process to me doing that is that I'm going to look at myself as a performer. I'm going to treat myself as a properly as a son and as a husband and as a family man. Now I've got another 3 identities, because I'm a different identity to my wife. I'm a different identity to my son. I'm a different identity. Now I've got a whole bunch of levels of achievement within that one thing that are still layering up to this goal of winning a Super Bowl. But now it's not one identity, it's 4. Maybe we can create another one that's a performer within their self-talk that we just talked about. We actually create a performance mindset for them, so that they can get into game mode. So now there's a 5th person in there. That's kind of the difference that I see, is you're either this singular idea that can only achieve this one thing, or you're these multitude of identities and ideas that you can actually achieve a lot of them and maybe never actually get that goal, but still be satisfied and fulfilled.
Mm. One of the things I've noticed in my work with clients is the high performers just have a ability to know, when to press and keep moving, because they're just in the messy middle, and okay, this is just, I'm finding it difficult, but if I keep working, I'm going to get the outcome, versus also the ability to go, I'm quitting, I've done my best, I'm moving on, I'm banking this learning, and I'm going. Is that true for you in your work? And from your experience, how do people develop that skill? Letting go can sometimes be hard when we've made that investment for hours, weeks, months, sometimes years for certain things, to just let it go and be able to move on to the next thing.
My experience would mirror yours. My experience of high performers is they don't interpret the world the same way that everyone else does. And part of that is the skill of either noticing or not noticing certain things. but also knowing what's helpful and what's not helpful to hold on to. And I don't know why that is with particular people, but I assume that it's a skill like anything else, just like there are better coaches than other coaches, and there are better CEOs, and there are better executives, and there are better coders, and there are better, you name it. And there seems to be one of the qualities that seems to be a little bit innate, perhaps, is the ability to just go, I know you think that was important, but I didn't even notice that because I was maybe too busy on actually the game or the goal or whatever. But all that is to say, I would, if we're going to call it a skill, then I think it becomes a practice. And part of the practice is in committing to, if you do want to walk away from something or you do want to move past something, there are things that you can do to try to prompt that within yourself. What a great way is just sleep. If you're feeling lousy or you're upset about a result or something, set yourself until I go to sleep, when I wake up in the morning, this is going to be gone. It is an easy way to start to practice. It'll be difficult, not say you're going to do it the first time, but now you've put a time around it, a goal around it. Tomorrow, this is going to be out of my mind. I'm going to be past it. And I think we can practice those things with intention rather than, at the moment, I feel like most people just do it without intention and just get whatever result comes when they wake up. Whereas I feel like you can actually commit to certain things for tomorrow. It's off to the next thing. I'm going to pursue that with some real gusto.
I want to talk about failure and success, and often a fear of failure is one of those things that can hold us back. And I just wondered about your view about what happens when fear takes hold of us, and how does that shape what we feel we can or can't do, and any tips you would have for people listening about navigating fear and stepping into it.
Yeah, it's certainly been crucial to my development as a coach and leader, and even just someone that's interested in Aussie rules football, and coaching. I was in the old TAC Cup pathway as a coach when I was 24, 25. I got into it pretty early after having played, and I thought I knew a little bit about coaching and the game, and then you come to a country where most people haven't even seen it on TV when they start playing, let alone been to a game. The biggest thing that I had to learn to remove was fear. Like, we would have players that were scared to kick the ball. Either because they didn't think that they could execute the skill to a level that they wanted, or that they played with someone at their club, probably an Aussie, who would yell at them if they didn't kick it properly because they were still learning. And so they just didn't want to do it. Now, that doesn't work when all the Canadian-born players come to me coaching the national team. I need someone to kick the ball.
Yeah.
And I need someone to take shots on goal as well. And so the task became to remove fear from their conditioning, which is quite tough. But you can just see it when you instill belief instead of fear in what they're doing, and say, I want you to take the shot on goal, and I mean it, and I'll wear losses if you kick points, but I want you to take it. And I, through my own experience, like, fear would be perhaps one of the biggest things that is a limiting factor, I think, in human potential and even just everyday performance. And it could be fear of judgment, it could be fear of belonging, it could be, or lack of belonging, or being ostracized from a group. It could be fear of a lack of mastery, or a fear of, it can be even a fear of who you become if you're successful. And so, I'm a avid kind of reader and listener of things about removing fear from just everyday life and how humans can flourish in that way. And I'm not even going to give you tips. I'm going to give you a book. Pippa Grange, Fear Less, is the book on this. And so Pippa's a friend of mine, and she's just the best in the world, and she explains it in a way that I could only dream of explaining it. And so go and buy Pippa's book, and it's a lesson on all the different ways that fear invades our lives.
Terrific. We'll obviously put that in the show notes, and I'm trying to get Pippa on the podcast, but it's an ongoing conversation at the moment. So the other thing with me being contradictory to my last question is we often talk about fear a lot, but you even mentioned there the fear of success and where that can take us and what that might mean. But we can learn a lot from success as well. Do you encourage that around that reflection? I know you mentioned before that journaling doesn't necessarily get people there, but do you encourage certain practices to take that success and where we learn from things we're actually doing well, to capture those as well?
Yeah, I mean, the sport is a whole discipline based in that, right? Like you really... again, I'll use something Neil Craig said to me. He's like, we're the ultimate scientists, as much as the sports scientists would disagree. Like coaches, they come with a hypothesis, like this drill is or this exercise is going to help us navigate this part of, and okay, go and test it, 10 minutes. I didn't quite get it. Can I try again? Can I adapt it? Or if it is successful, well, we're going to keep that. That's going to go into our regular routine. And so luckily there is a bit of a natural process for that in what we're doing, in that we're actually trying to accumulate helpful and successful ideas and add more and more and more of them into the environment and put more and more people around that can facilitate those high performance elements. And the objective is to create an environment where you have all of those successful elements stacked together, and then you can go and do something really interesting. I would say on success, what many don't do is they don't plan or know how to facilitate success after success. To go back to the previous point, it's like, who do we become now? Or who do I become now that we're successful? And you can actually plan a little bit for that. You can say, well, if we do win, what happens? It's a big assumption that everyone's going to demand more money and we're not going to be able to fit under the salary cap. That may happen, probably, but it doesn't have to happen. And there can be a line of thinking that goes down exploring what happens after we win, because, to circle back, and I think this might be your last question, so I'll go back to my first answer is like, I'm interested in creating juggernauts. I'm not interested in winning once. I'm invested in the coaches. I want to win multiple times. I'm talking winning after winning after winning, because it's the hardest thing to do in sports. And so let's go and try to do that. And one of the things is thinking through what happens if we do win and actually having a plan and not being scared of that.
I love that. Not quite my last question, but I certainly appreciate the answer. So what's success for you?
Well, from a career perspective, I have a singular goal, and that is to be a participant in rehumanizing coaching in sport. And so I'm very clear on that. There's been dehumanized to a point that's unacceptable as far as I'm concerned. And so, my mission and my books and my speaking and everything layers up to trying to rehumanize and introduce, whole human ideas into performance sport.
And how can people find you, Cody, in terms of, they've listened, they've loved what you've said. Where do they go to find out a little bit more about you and get some more?
Well, the good thing is with a name like Cody Royle, I'm pretty easy to find. I think there's one other kid out in Denver, Colorado that shares a name, but I got all the good social media handles. But the easiest place to find me is codyroyle.com. So head there and, please do get in touch if you're interested in exploring something I've said or disagreeing with something I've said, I'm open to that too. And my email address is on there, so I'm perfectly contactable.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for extending that invitation. Any last pieces of advice that I haven't asked you about that you think is a nugget that might help people listening, who want to amplify their personal, professional impact?
Well, I think the theme of what we've been talking about, just to reiterate it, nothing new perhaps, but, I think it's okay to have big goals and objectives, and I think we should be a little bit braver and a little less fearful in pursuing those. The story of human history is progress and bold objectives, and I don't see why we should buy into this narrative that it can't be you that achieves that bold objective. And I think you should pursue it, because I think it's a core kind of human desire, and it's okay to have those big goals. Go after them is my last piece of advice.
What a great finish as a call to action for everyone listening. Thanks so much, Cody, for your time. Thanks for the insights, and thanks for the final challenge for people to go out and strive, go be great at what we're doing and go and make an impact. And not just for one day or one project, but as you're saying, go be a juggernaut in the stuff that matters to you. So thanks for your time. It's been a great conversation.
Thanks, Andrew. Appreciate you having me.
A quick word before we go. Just a reminder about the new and exciting initiative, the Better Life Lab. If you want to be first and part of the exclusive launch, go to andrewhorsfield.com/Better Life Lab. Thanks for listening.